My name is Denny Cosmo, representing the Student Veterans of America chapter at Bristol Community College and the Joseph A. Marshall Veterans Center. I'm interviewing William Kligel on Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, at the Disabled American Veterans Chapter 7 Meeting Hall in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Also present is Steve Reese from the Fall River Community Media, who is operating the camera. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. William, you go by Bill?
Yes, I do.
Nice to meet you, Bill.
Nice to meet you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
I was born in Pendleton, Oregon. The reason that I started in the military, my dad was at Otis Air Force Base here in Massachusetts. My mom was going to the veteran dances and stuff, met my dad. They fell in love, so she moved back to Oregon, where he was from, and when she got married, by the time she was 20, she had 5 kids.
Wow.
So I grew up on military bases until I was in high school at either military barracks or family housing, basically. And all my family was in the military. I had 117 relatives that when I went for my clearance, it took 2 years because they have to background everybody before you get your clearance. So it's just in the blood of my family. In fact, all our graduation pictures disappeared off the wall. I have 5 siblings, and they are all replaced by our military uniforms. So the history is in my blood.
Yeah. Bill, you said your father was in the military, and what did he do in the military?
My father was in the Air Force, and he did security and different things like you do as civil service, as far as laying out things, as far as different radars and intelligence stuff. He was stationed overseas in Antarctica and Greenland, so that was his tours of duty and stuff. But he was back in Oregon where he was born because they had him stationed at the local post there to set up their post when they started the same program.
Oh. So you come from a long line of warfighters and veterans, so it was kind of baked into the cake that you would join the military? Yes.
My brother actually did the genealogy. We go back all the way to the first wars that were fought in America and stuff. My dad's side of the family is from Germany. Don't like to admit it, but some of his family were actually part of the Nazi program before it became World War I. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, on the other half, was Irish, and she came from Ireland. And all her family were in the Irish military. So my great-grandparents ended up in Oregon, and they moved out of Ireland and Oregon because they were Jewish. Mm. Come to America, became Christians, and our military history went from there.
Wow. So when you joined the military, were you interested in pursuing like your father's line in the Air Force, or did you cut your own path in the military?
When I started the military, my dad had finished active duty. He was now in a National Guard unit out of New Bedford, which was the old 211th. And when I first started, I went into the regular Navy at Great Lakes, Illinois. The problem was, it was 1978. They flew us down there on top of the storms in a propeller airplane because they ran out of airplanes. I busted both eardrums, passed out, along with 9 other people. The day before we graduated at Great Lakes, Illinois, they said, "You pre-existing condition, we're sending you home. You get 9 weeks to heal." 9 weeks home, I said, "I'm joining the Army." Navy didn't treat me right. So when I joined the Army, I stayed in for 30 years.
So before you even got to training in the Navy, you kind of already suffered a military-connected disability?
Correct. And the Navy wouldn't admit it because they said it was pre-existing. I hadn't started boot camp yet. All right, so I finished boot camp in the Navy, but they wouldn't give me the graduation certificate because they said it was pre-existing injury. So according to them, it doesn't count as an injury. According to them, it doesn't count as anything military, but they let me keep my rank as an E3, and I joined the Army as an E3, going to basic training the second time.
What when you went into the Navy and you went to training, what was your
I
rating?
was submarine duty,
Okay.
radar repair on the submarines. And I had gone through all the training, basic training, and I was already starting some of the electronic training. And that's when they said, hey, look, it seems that like you had this injury before you come down here and stuff. You can't go on the sub because your ears haven't fully healed. We're going to send you home. They said it's not dishonorable. It's going to be a temporary release from the Navy, but you have no commitment once we release you, and in 9 weeks you can come back. So I said, if I have no commitment when I got home, I wasn't home 2 weeks and I joined the Army.
Okay. So that transition into the Army, you've already had a little bit of radar electrician training?
Correct. So when I started in the Army, I kept my E3. They sent me to school for crypto, teletype repair, and radio repair at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So I was the top one in the class and everything. So I just kind of breezed through it and stuff, and that was my profession or MOS for the military. And when I came back, it was like I had nobody really in charge of me other than the master sergeant, and I was allowed more or less to, as long as I repaired the radios, nobody bothered me.
Did you like that? That's kind of like a different experience in the military where it's very disciplined and regimented, and it sounds like you had a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more flexibility.
I grew up with grandparents and everybody that were kind of very direct. My grandparents, when they got out, and I'm talking both male and female, were in the military, they were very direct to the point. They became professors in colleges. Oh. And I can remember even as a kid when we moved out of Oregon, if you wrote my grandmother, she'd send back your letter corrected because she was an English professor. All right. My grandfather was a football coach after he got out of there for Oregon State football, and then became a referee. So he was very disciplined and kind of harsh, but he loved people. He really loved people.
Okay. When after Fort Sill, and where were you stationed, and where were you assigned in the Army?
Well, in the Army, although I did a lot of active duty, I was National Guard also. So I was in probably 26 different states just here in the country doing military service. And I think I counted one time about 20 different countries. So I've been everywhere from Fort Irwin, California, all the way up to Gagetown, Canada, training with either the Canadians and I even got offered a job at Fort Irwin to do their military academy, because I had jobs as the instructor that trained the instructor to teach for the Massachusetts Military Academy, for Fort McClellan, and for Fort Drum. So being an instructor, being able to teach somebody to teach, I went wherever they sent me, and I liked the money, I liked the freedom of what I was doing, so I didn't care. So I was always on active duty. If not for regular Army active duty, it was TDY through the National Guard, which counted the same as active duty.
Like Active Guard Reserve?
Yes.
AGR?
Yes. Well, it wasn't AGR, it was TDY.
Okay.
So actually, they would release you from the National Guard to go on to a military post as almost like a regular troop. And then they release you from that back to the National Guard when you were done. So it didn't count as a break of service, but I would actually be pulled from my position in the Guard, given to the Army, and then go back home again.
Okay. What are some of the highlights of your military experience? What are some of the things that you're most proud of?
I think one of the things I was most proud of, I was one of the few people that actually got drafted for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. At the time, I was in a Guard unit that their equipment had been taken away for the buildup of different things, even before the Iraqi war started. So I volunteered for the state of Massachusetts to go around and get people combat ready in case we ever got the call. Well, in the process, unbeknownst to me, one of the units was a transportation unit that was the major transport unit for the 3rd of the 173rd 82nd Airborne. So when the 82nd Airborne was starting for Desert Shield, before the war even started, they tasked that particular unit was going to move them around, but they weren't combat ready. I had written 9 pages of what they needed to do. So they came down with the state police. They came to my house and says, "You're part of the 82nd Airborne now." I said, "I'm National Guard." He says, "No, you've been drafted. They need you. You're going. You got 72 hours to report." So I was very proud of the fact I was one of the few that was actually drafted for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I didn't go with my unit. The bad side of that, most of the wars I did go to, and I went to 4, I was never with the people that I trained with. I was always given to somebody as the expert for their unit because they were at a higher echelon than some of the other troops. So when they needed somebody and they were shorthanded, and I ended up with 17 MOSs or specialties because I was in a unit that, hey, look, if we get this specialty, we'll get a little more funding. And because I had an IQ, they kept sending me to school, so I ended up with the 17 specialties.
What are 5 of the top 5 of those 17?
Security, nuclear, biological, chemical, explosives, and leadership training.
Okay. How long in total did you serve?
30 years.
30 years. Did you have any kind of difficulty transitioning out of the military?
Constantly. I think the biggest shock to me is it was my final tour overseas in the war zone, and I came home, my granddaughter I think was 4, and I was studying for college at BCC at the time, Bristol Community College. And I'm doing my schoolwork, I fell asleep, and we always joked with each other. She was my little angel, my granddaughter, and she wanted to startle me. And I reached out and threw her across the kitchen. And that's when I realized I need help. I was just too hyper alert, always at the back of the wall, and it took me a long time to transition back to civilian life. But even now, when I worked a civilian job, I couldn't stand the civilian ethics. I was so hard trained. You do things a certain way, you have some sort of pride in what you're doing, and you follow orders to get the mission done. You work as a team. In civilian life, that happens seldom. So I had a real hard time.
Can you see any kind of benefits or positive differences from the way the civilian world operates compared to the military world?
The military, there's both pros and cons. In the military, it's better structured to work as a team. In the military, there's no such thing, color, creed, race, religion, because in the military, that guy, no matter what he is your buddy to save the bullets from you, you save the bullets from him. You become a tighter family and tighter brotherhood than anywhere else. You come home, even your real brothers and sisters don't mean as much to you as that guy that's making sure you stay alive.
Okay. Being from Oregon and kind of the New England area, what kind of organizations did you join after you got out or while you were in service to help settle in here?
The list is quite long. I belong to the New Bedford JCs. I was a stage manager for
The
Bill.
JCs?
JCs are basically Junior Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
All right. In fact, the prior mayor for New Bedford was Fred Kligel, and it was him, 2 of the people ended up as district attorneys in the area, and I was only a teenager. I did that, but even before that, I used to do reenactments at Fort Phoenix for Haven and reenact as either a British soldier or a colonial. And I had the old Springfield weapon with the musket, flint loader, and we fired the cannons and everything. And Fort Phoenix has histories going all the way back to George Washington and Betsy Ross. So I really liked the history of it. Yeah. I was already regimented as far as what military life was about, although it was only an act. All right, but I belonged to them, JCs, Junior Achievement, which is the business of business or learning how to do it. I was a Boy Scout, made it up to Life Scout, but I started late. I was in 4-H club when I was out in the Midwest. I belonged to the Lions Club. I made it up to district manager, VFW, American Legion, DAV, and all three of the military ones I'm adjutant currently, which is basically like a secretary. You do all the paperwork and everything. I'm a service officer here, which does paperwork for veterans needing benefits. And I tied for Veteran of the Year this year, and when they had the runoff, I ended up in second, but I didn't want it. I feel if you're going to get an award for doing for veterans what you love, you know, that's like boasting. I don't do it to get an award. I do it because they need it, they respect it, and when there's a brotherhood. All right? These people that do get some of these awards are getting paid over $100,000 a year. They get the award, and they're getting paid to do what they're getting evaluated on to get. No, I want no part of that. I'm sorry. What I do because the veteran comes first. And we got a brotherhood that I grew up in, that's all that counts. That's what I was taught, and that's what it really means. All right? When you're in combat, you remember everybody that's on your team because you work as a team. All right? To have somebody that will come in and, well, hey, look, I did this, I did that. Okay, we all did something. All right? Even the guy that doesn't go to war, you know, and he stays behind, he's part of that cog in the wheel that keeps everybody else going. And sometimes we had a guy that killed himself because all his buddies went to war, he stayed home, he felt guilty. So he made up stories and everything, and then finally he couldn't take it no more. Committed suicide. Suicide in the military is a big problem. Whether you go to war or you don't. But there's reasons to do it on both sides of that coin. So I feel to get recognition for what you're doing when there's people out there hurting so bad and nobody's listening to them, those are the people that should be listened to.
What kind of advice do you give a veteran that you meet? First-hand experience or kind of advice or wisdom?
Well, if you give first-hand experience, a lot of times it doesn't go over well. The biggest thing that helps somebody that's going to commit suicide is to remember the brotherhood. All right? And what I mean by that is veterans can click in right away, no matter how depressed they are, knowing that they always had somebody in the military that were so close to them that they understand what they're going through. So usually what I do, if somebody's going to be depressed or they have a problem with that, look, who is your best buddy? Do you still stay in contact with them? All right? Who did you look up to in the military? Do you respect me as a military brother? Here's a number. Get it in your wallet. Anytime that you have anything you want to talk about, call somebody. And we've had people that wanted to commit suicide. They called their brotherhood on the California, Oregon, what have you. They would call somebody that was in family back here. So it's going back and forth across the states. But that brotherhood can be anywhere in the world. Yeah. And it finally connects back to the family or back to somebody that we can help them with.
Okay. You got over 30 years military experience.
Yes.
You come from a long line of family members that served in the military. What would you tell a New Bedford student today that's contemplating joining the military or not, or isn't sure of their future? What kind of wisdom or advice would you give from your perspective?
The first thing I'd tell them, remember, it's going to start out hard. It's almost like they're stripping away layers to build you back up. Because a lot of times people learn the wrong things for whatever reason. You know, there's always people thinking it's for the better of them. But the truth of the matter is the military, when you first get to basic, kind of strips away that, and they build you up to not only have self-confidence in yourself, but to understand what teamwork is all about. Mm-hmm. Also, that person may have gone through school and they were bullied or whatever. In the military, we take care of our own. All right? You're going to bring that brotherhood to you, or sisterhood, because there's women that are in the military also, and they're going to get together. They're going to form that team. They're going to learn additional skills that's going to stay with them the rest of their lives. They're going to increase their IQ, maybe their livelihood, the money to be able to support their family, and their leadership skills of knowing how to attack a problem. These are all things that are going to carry through the rest of their life for their benefit and the family's benefit. Not to count how long they stay in and whatever they need for benefits for college, to help the family, for retirement. These are things that, if you look in the civilian world, they're going away. The military still offers this.
Yeah. Again, 30 years is a storied career, long, a lot of experience, a lot of ins and outs. What's something that maybe in your experience that you look back and you would gladly do it again, or maybe you would have changed something over that 30 years?
The favorite thing I have is we go to Iraq, and everybody thinks it's a war. We're just there to kill people.
Is this 91 or 2003?
This was in, let me see, 91. We're attached to the 82nd Airborne, and the colonel tells us from the 82nd, he says, yeah, you flew over here with the guard and stuff, but you're part of us now. Okay. So the war is over and we're settling down. He says, we're doing one thing before we leave here. And we're all like, what's this? So we figured we're going in to clean up the residue of the Republican Guards. No. We're making a difference to these people that they understand what we're really about. We went into orphanage, and there was a little girl, 13 years old, 28-pound cyst in her. She's going to die. Republican Guard had killed her family, her brothers and sisters. She was the only one left. She had nobody. So we go in, and we're looking at the cysts. She was only given a few months to live. So what we did is we got her with the Korean and the American doctor, and we said, well, we can take the cysts out and see what we can do so you have a better chance to live a productive life. They took the cysts out and everything and did everything else. Well, at the time, I was in charge of security. So they said, you got to go home and get married before something happens, because I was already on a hit list to be killed. I go home, and as I'm going home to marry my bride, there's a guy sitting in front of me. He ends up sitting next to me, and the girl and boy end up together now because it was mother and son. The guy was Steve Drucker. Steve Drucker is the CEO of Hasbro. So I told him about us going to the orphanages and everything else, and he says, what can I do to help? He sent me 3 cases of the dark-skinned G.I. Joe dolls that talked both Arabic and English, because he programmed them that way. So we could bring them back to the orphanages and give these kids that never had a toy a military G.I. Joe doll to say, hey, look, we're not all bad guys. That made a huge difference in that orphanage, which spread out to the villages and stuff. These guys can't be all bad.
Right.
All right? But that was only one incident. We corrected a little boys' club feat. There was guys that had their hands cut off for touching American money. We give them prosthetics. But we changed a life. At the time, the goal was 5 people. We did 17. And I can remember it was so great. The Stars and Stripes picked up those stories. I still have the articles. And the fact I did more than just being on a battlefield, killing the enemy, that we made a difference in that country, means more to me and the guys I was with than just being out there on the battlefield.
Yeah, there's something about not just destroying, but building.
Correct. And a lot of people don't understand, we're trying to show, hey, look, we'll help you against your aggressors, but you have to stand up for yourself, and there is ways of doing it. And by being helpful and letting them know we're not there as the enemy, we're there to take away their aggressors and hopefully make them understand they can live a productive life.
What are some of the things that, people that don't understand the military get wrong? And how would you explain to them the right concept?
Well, classic example, both in Iraq and in Vietnam especially, which I'm not old enough to be in Vietnam. People are saying you're just baby killers, you're killing innocent, and the list goes on and on. And one of the things I can remember, because I grew up in the military, they said, oh yeah, Vietnam was all baby killers. And I said, wait a minute, do you realize why they think that? Well, they went into the village and just killed. No. Children are used in any war as propaganda. They wire a kid in a bicycle full of explosives. They're coming to your team of 20 people or whatever you have to blow you up. It's a very hard choice that haunts you the rest of your life to kill that child, all to save the people you're around. That child may not even know they got explosives on them. All right? And I says, to say we're just baby killers, you don't understand the situation. You need to be quiet.
Earlier you mentioned you joined a lot of veterans organizations, the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV.
Yes.
How has that work helped your community and helped you in your transition help other veterans?
Well, I do a lot of volunteer hours. The DAV has a program called LVAP, which is basically they count up your volunteer hours, they submit them through the state, and that's how they break down the funding for different areas. Well, in that course, I've done between last month and most of this month, 500 hours. One of the things that's coming up is on Thanksgiving, we do a meal for any veteran and their family that has no place to go due to money, due to the fact that it's too much stress, they don't want the family over, and they come to the American Legion, and we set it apart from the bar in case they don't want to drink, and they sit there with camaraderie, other veterans, and eat a meal without having to worry about anything else. We do that with the particular American Legion. We only close on New Year's Eve. We're open every day, 364 days a year, to accept veterans in their needs.
This is in Acushnet, Mass?
Acushnet, Mass. Mike Jenny is a VSO for Haven. I'm his adjutant for the American Legion. And just last year alone, we did 17 meals for a mass group of veterans. Thanksgiving last year, we did 9 full turkeys, 20-pound turkeys, and the fixings. We have pizza days when we see it's hard on the community, and he makes homemade pizzas. We did 39 pizzas, all right, and just fed them to them. Not a single penny cost, all right. They come in, they eat, and usually we'll have myself, Mike, and a few others go around and just start a conversation at each table with the veterans. Next thing you know, they're opening up and some of their stress melts away. They're able to enjoy a meal with nobody asking how many people you killed, which is so wrong. And the public, and especially younger ones, and it's hard to tell a kid, that's not what you ask a veteran, all right? But the concept is, if you've never been there, you never know. Right. So they ask the wrong questions. So being able to go to someplace, have a meal, be around other veterans that understand point blank where you're coming from, what's bothering you, and why.
If we go back a little bit, you said you were in the Massachusetts National Guard.
Correct.
You said you were in another state National Guard.
I was in 3 states, California, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire.
And New Hampshire. What were the actual battalions or regiments that you were assigned to?
In California, it was 1st of the 123rd Maintenance Battalion. I was a tank turret repairman.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, it was the 197th Field Artillery, and I was nuclear, biological, and chemical, and a trainer. And Massachusetts, I was radio repair and chemical warfare also, and I also taught and worked out of the Massachusetts Military Academy, teaching cadets and enlisted how to be a proper soldier for leadership, how to do different skill tasks, and then I went on to train the trainer so the future instructors would know how to do their job.
Thank you. What else do you think the American public should know about you, Bill, like yourself and your military experience? Speaking directly to the American public.
First of all, the American public needs to know it's not about me. It's about everybody we represent. I am not one that wants to be the figurehead of something that everybody's blood, sweat, and tears developed. All right? Yes, I was a big part of it. Yes, I did my job. I did different things. But it's about bringing those veterans back into the fold and letting the public know, no, this guy may drink, all right? And we're getting him help. But do you realize what he did for you, for your freedoms, and what an effect it had on him? Mm. So the first time you go and blame a veteran because he's drinking or can't handle things, you need to understand why. Mm-hmm. All right? So when it comes down to what did I do in the military and everything else, I served my country the best I could. I was there as a mentor in my later years for veterans and stuff. I've stopped suicides. I've trained people. But it's not about me. It's about veterans helping veterans so that this country can stay free, have free elections, and be who we are. We're the best country in the world. I don't care what anybody says. Spend 2 weeks in another country, then tell me how you like it.
Good. Is there anything more specifically to like New Bedford? Is there anything that we could be doing for the, not nationwide, not Commonwealth wide, but New Bedford, Massachusetts? What could we be doing for the veterans here? What do they need, and how can we get it to them?
Well, the veterans in Massachusetts, people don't realize Fairhaven and New Bedford right now has lost all their veteran agencies. DAV is technically not a New Bedford Veterans Club because it's regional. So we cover from New Bedford all the way down to the Cape. So to say the DAV New Bedford chapter is just about New Bedford is wrong because we carry a large area. As far as New Bedford itself, the clubs went away most of the time because they can't pay the financial bills. It's hard to get people to join any veteran club nowadays. And if you think about it, people in World War II came back with a lot of disabilities. They started a lot of these veterans clubs and stuff, but because of their injuries, they were able to go to these clubs and keep them running. Mm. The family supported them, so they had auxiliaries. Well, nowadays you got Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans, and we got a few in New Bedford, and what happens is they have to maintain a job when they come back. They don't have time to participate in different clubs. And that's why a lot of these clubs didn't have the money for membership to keep them going. They kind of went away. What I'd like to see New Bedford do, and we have a mayor that's non-military, so he has no concept, is to have something where veterans can come together. And that's why, if you look in the back, I got a chess table. There's one for here also, besides the one we're raffling off. Come in and just sit, play checkers, have a cup of coffee, and just relax. Mm. But the city of New Bedford needs to recognize what we have as a veteran population, to do things to get these people together, because some of these people would be the best people for security guards at schools, best people to teach leadership in, say, a school or a college. These people have more skills than what the city realizes. We need to utilize this valuable source. The city needs to realize they need to protect these people. They need to help these people. They fought for the freedom of this city and the country. You need to bring in programs that's going to help the guy that comes back. He doesn't have a job no more. He's living homeless. he's doing this. Now, yes, we have a veterans transition house. It's full constantly.
Yeah.
All right? We have programs that Chapter 115 gives veterans almost like veterans welfare. That's not enough to live on.
No.
They still need more. All right? So if the city recognized, hey, look, we need to maybe change the perspective as far as hiring a veteran first. Because although we have a 10% benefit on a lot of the civil service jobs, the city doesn't recognize that all the time. All right? If we bring these veterans out of the dark and back into the fold of working with the community, be a better city.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of mentioned like when veterans came back in World War II, they joined these veterans organizations. And then you mentioned the veterans that come back from GWOT, the Global War on Terrorism, and they got to work. Do you think, I mean, when people came back from World War II, they went right back into work too at the same rates? What is the challenge?
The problem is, back in World War II, when all the men left, the women, which were typically housewives, raised the children, became the workforce. Mm-hmm. The men come back, they go back into the workforce. The women went back to taking care of the children in the house, but they enjoyed that freedom of working. Mm-hmm. These women became most of the volunteers for all these clubs because they were so used to those extra hours working and taking care of the family. Nowadays, with the economy and everything else, both sides of the parents are working. They don't have that opportunity to help out as an auxiliary. The veterans that come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff, they feel it's all about World War II, Vietnam, all these old guys that just go to a club and drink. It's not about drinking. No. It's about camaraderie, reflecting with each other, building up a relationship that you always knew somebody had your back. All right? This doesn't happen no more because the perspective is off. People don't realize what these clubs were originally designed for. And a lot of the Iraqi veterans and the Afghanistan veterans, right on their release, it tells them the nearest clubs to join. Well, nowadays, with the clubs going away, that club may be 30 miles away. Well, I'm not doing that. I got too much going on. I'd rather get the overtime, all right? Whereas back when World War II veterans came back, they'd go back to a wage that was supporting the family. Only one person in the house was working. So if the wife wanted to have a little part-time job on the side, the husband didn't have to work all of the overtime. He was able to go to a club and stuff. And at the time, the wife used to like it because it used to help him calm down, understand, and he'd be a better father in the family to help deal with his demons. Now we got veterans coming back. They never deal with their demons. They don't go to these clubs. They don't have the camaraderie. And they're like going down a lost path. And that's important to get veterans to work with veterans so they understand they're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Bill, going back to, again, it's going back to your service record, what rank did you get out of after 30
Sergeant
years?
First Class.
Sergeant First
I
Class.
would have gone up higher, but my last units were National Guard. And in the National Guard, and it's hard to say, but a lot of times somebody has to either leave or die before that slot comes open so you can get promoted. All right? You probably have, like in the military, you compete across the board on all the states and stuff to get that position. In the National Guard, people join for life. Well, if everything's filled up in that Guard unit, you have to change a Guard unit or go somewhere else to find that slot to get promoted.
Yeah.
All right? I had taught in military academies all the way up to Sergeant Major. So I had all the skills to be a Sergeant Major, but I never had the slot.
Mm. Had you ever thought of going like active duty instead of the National Guard?
I did quite often.
Yeah.
I went back and forth between National Guard and active duty quite a few times. All right? So yes, I may have 30 years in the military, but just counting the wars would have been about 6 years. And I had about 10 years total active duty because I would take tours to this unit or that unit. And a lot of time I'd do warfighter, which is war games. And I was good at what they were doing So they would get a better score and stuff because I did all the chemical or the leadership styles. And I enjoyed it. And not only that, the money was good at the time. It's not like the old days. Typically in World War II, a guy might get $63 a month. As an E7 in Iraq, it was $9,000.
Yeah. That's good. And it's tax-free if you're in a
Correct.
hostile
Tax-free, or if they
pay.
did take the taxes out, you got it back the next month. You know, they gave benefits for the family. They've come a long way as far as supporting the veteran and the family. But there's still the lower ranks in the military that are on food stamps. That's despicable. That shouldn't happen.
What do you think is going on for you in the next year or so? What's on your agenda for helping veterans in the community?
Currently, I'm working with a transportation problem that we have in this area. I've called DC. I've called the state headquarters for both Mass and Rhode Island because of the way the VA puts a region. So you have the state of Mass, the state of Rhode Island, but the region to go to the veteran hospital, which is closest to New Bedford in this area, is in Rhode Island, Providence. So there's an argument, who dispatches the vehicle? Who's going to run the vehicles and stuff? So I've gotten the two commanders from the DAV, both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, to work together. I've got a couple of senators I've called and say, hey, look, can you help me? In the process, I'm the enemy. I got a target on my back because I'm, excuse the expression, pissing people off. Well, veterans help veterans. Does it really matter who you get mad? Or does it really make them realize maybe we need to change this? We're not helping the veteran anymore.
So the structure is the VA has VISNs, regions.
They
networks.
have regions which don't follow state guidelines.
Right.
All right,
bleed over the
each state's
state.
trying to take over for the glory, so to speak. Hey, this is my region. All right? But the region is actually Rhode Island from New Bedford down to Hyannis for the transportation. And Massachusetts, no, we're taking that. That's our state. And Rhode Island say, no, we've been given this region because that's in our territory. So we need to forget about these guidelines, as they call it, for regions, and realize we're all veterans. It shouldn't be a state line dividing what's going on. But the nice thing about Massachusetts, just on top of that, in Massachusetts, being a Commonwealth, we allow a veteran service officer for every city. And then you have the clubs with chapter service officers. You go to Rhode Island, it's per county. Each county may have 5 or 6 cities. So we have more help for veterans here in Mass and more programs for veterans here in Mass than Rhode Island. And people in Rhode Island will constantly come in here and say, well, you know, what do I get for veterans? Well, I heard you get only if you have a house of record in Massachusetts will you get those state benefits.
Yeah.
All right? So that's a problem just doing the job here at this chapter house because it's different once you go across the state line.
Okay. Is there anything, closing up, Bill, is there anything else that you want to let the people know or kind of explain better or share?
I think people's concept of thanking a veteran sometimes, because you always get people, you know, thank you for your service. And I never knew what to say. Finally, an old sergeant major says, thank you for your appreciation, should be the answer. And, you know, because I did it because I wanted to, and that's what I believed in. So I never knew how to answer it.
Right.
So when we tell a person now, thank you for your appreciation, they look at you startled. They don't know how to respond. They don't realize, thank you for recognizing us. The Vietnam veterans didn't get that. They were spit on and everything else. So I'm just want to tell the public, thank you for finally coming about and realizing what we're doing.
Yeah. Bill, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.